today we are very excited to introduce to you lawyer and founder of Just Well Law, Christina Bear. Christina is a national trial lawyer who represents sick people against the companies that made them sick. She founded her law firm, Just Well Law, to help clients recover financially so that they can rebuild their health and their lives. So we're really excited to dive in today. We have 2 Juris Doctors in the room and 1 MD. So I love that. We are all very passionate about moving forward this awakening that's happening surrounding mold, justice for mold victims, and the fact that people can't hide from the fact that mold causes harm anymore. So thanks for being here with us today.
I'm glad to be here. Awesome. I think what you said is exactly right. They can't deny it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah.
Definitely not with a good lawyer. And I'm so honored to be in both of your presences. Obviously, Christina, I hope to follow in your footsteps. I am pursuing environmental law and taking the bar exam in less than 2 weeks now. So we're excited for that.
I've been following. We need to raise up an army of lawyers. So the more the merrier. Come join us.
Definitely. And I think it's so important, as much amazing medical knowledge as we have and we get from the Detox doc every day, unfortunately, it only goes so far. Like, you usually need a lawyer to really tell people what to do, and to sometimes people can't get out if they don't have the right lawyer or they can't afford things. So important. And thank you again for being here.
Yeah. So we would love to hear how Just Well Law came about, and if you could tell our audiences that.
Well, I had been sick forever. I'd been sick for a few years and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. It's a familiar story to your audience, I'm sure. I was going to doctor after doctor after doctor. I said things like, I feel like I've been hit by a truck. I can't wake up in the morning. I'm under a wet blanket. I am fuzzy. I can't see straight. And then I had really upsetting thoughts, like maybe I should drive into oncoming traffic. Things that I had never thought before. And doctors just said, I think you have some stress in your life. I was a partner at a big firm. I had 4 kids. I got the working mom answer, consider meditation, change your diet, change your job. And so I actually did that. I went to the government and I had every other Friday off and I loved it. I was an assistant U.S. attorney and I really changed my lifestyle. I was gluten-free and sugar-free and I was exercising more and I was working at my kids' school on Fridays. And I got sicker. And then they sent us to go quarantine at home during COVID and work at home. And that's when I really took a deep dive. And I finally went to another set of doctors, and Dr. Gabriel Picardo at Resilient Health gave me a battery of tests, and one of them was mycotoxins. And she said, go test your house. And honestly, I mean, test for what? I had no idea. It had never occurred to me that my house could be making me sick. I lived in a beautiful house. I loved my house. It was my own little dream house. It wasn't a fancy house, but it was just a really sweet, pretty, perfect house for my family. And it never occurred to me that my house was making me sick. So we started building a case against our builder and who poisoned our family. And as we did that, we realized there are very few lawyers who do this and there need to be more. So I hung out a little shingle and said, I'll help other families. And I got 1,000 calls. And that was 3 years ago. And now we get 1,000 calls about every month. And we're just keeping up.
Amazing.
Wow. Incredible, truly incredible. And of course, we're sorry to hear that you went through it, but I think both of us and everyone in this industry has experienced mold or something similar. And that's why we're so passionate about it because, you know, even someone like me who's currently just doing mold assessment, but the power to help people heal is really in our hands. And it's such a, you know, I would do it for free, which unfortunately is not always the case. But, you know, we all provide free content. And think one of something I like the most about your content, which is super helpful, free, global stuff, you talk about should people feel bad bringing claims, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, if someone's poisoned your family, well, I like the builder, I don't want to harm them, but this is about justice and healing. So can you maybe talk about the importance of bringing these claims forward?
In the closing argument in my own trial, the opposing counsel stood up and said, the Bears have lots of resources. And you know, by the way, bear in mind, at this point, we'd lost our house. We lost everything in it. My father-in-law had taken out a mortgage on his house so that we could continue and finish fixing ours. I mean, we had lost absolutely everything. But he said the Bears have lots of resources. And when bad things happen, we need to be thankful for what we have. And that really hurt me because I am thankful for what I have. And he seemed to be implying that thankful people don't bring legal claims. And it really launched this whole inner search in me of, is it wrong to bring a claim? And I realized that it's brave to bring a claim. And I went back and I looked at my own testimony to the jury, and the jury sided with us, by the way, and we had a verdict. But I looked at my testimony and I just wanted them to know. And that's what I told them. I said, I'm doing this because I want people to know, and I didn't know. And I want as many people as possible to know because people are getting sick and they don't even know it. And so for me, it was about transparency and it was about just awareness. But for a lot of my clients, it's about making sure it doesn't happen again, right? And that's what I wanted too. But if we don't bring the claims, then who will? And the justice system is entrusted with enforcing the safety rules. So if the claims aren't brought to the justice system, then the justice system can't do its job. It'd be like, right, if you never report crime, or if victims never report their assaults. One of the reasons that victims report their assaults is to make sure it doesn't happen again, so that there's deterrence, right? And the law is about two things. Tort law, which is the kind of work we do, is about compensating victims, but it's also about deterring the bad conduct and preventing bad conduct. And you can't do one without the other. The compensation has to be enough to have a deterrent effect, to send a message. And that's what the law is for. And I really believe that. And that's what my life is now dedicated to.
I love that. And I've listened to some of the other podcasts you've done, and what I love that I've also heard you say is that some of the evidence that's brought is medical articles, right? Because you can just say straight up, this is, how does mold cause this? And then you can then relate it to what they've gone through.
Yeah, and
it's really not. Yeah, it's not that hard. It's not a stretch for juries. It's a stretch for judges, and it's a stretch for lawyers, because judges and lawyers and doctors grew up in the last 2 decades learning that mold was junk science. And the bad guys really effectively convinced a whole generation of people that mold doesn't actually make you sick. And by the way, this is true in all exposure cases I'm learning. You have to follow the logic. But if mold doesn't make you sick, then people who think that they're sick from mold are what? Crazy.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Psychosomatic.
Right.
And so they have convinced a generation of doctors and lawyers and judges that people who think that they're sick from mold are crazy.
Yeah.
And that's it's the crazy defense. And it's not okay. And it's not true. And what's beautiful about science having caught up is that we can just show that's not true. People really are getting sick, and juries understand. Juries understand.
Well, we're thankful for that. Like you say all the time, it's our justice system is by the people, and I think, you know, we've seen through our content that people relate to this stuff, and people relate to people, and you know, obviously the attorney on the other side may not want it to be true, but they really can't deny the truth. And I've spoken with attorneys who are on the other side of this, who they make it seem like it's very easy to shut down one of these mold cases, which I'm sure it is, because it's, you know, there's a lot of moving parts. There's mold spores, there's mycotoxins, there's fungal fragments, there's microbial volatile organic compounds. How do you, as an attorney who has some good success with these cases, how do you really prove, hey, the mold is causing these issues, that someone just can't shoot that down with some kind of air test or something like that?
We just talk in common sense. I mean, you just threw out a lot of gobbledygook, right? And I love you, dude, but like that was a lot of gobbledygook. We don't need the gobbledygook. We need, here's a picture of a vent. This is the air she was breathing. How did this vent get that way? Well, I have a case right now where the vent gets that way because anytime someone complains about mold, and we can see this in the maintenance records, they replace the vents.
Oh.
So they just replace the outer vent, right? And you can see I have a beautiful outer vent here. Now imagine if it was full of mold on the other side and I just replaced the covering. I mean, that's insane. And a jury understands that. A jury understands that. The answer is not to replace the cover. And if you just replace the cover over and over and over again, then the mold proliferates on the other side and it gets worse and worse and worse. And then you have this picture of this just deep black box. And you say that is the air she was breathing. And a jury is not surprised then that she was fine, her medical records are all fine, moves in, takes a deep dive in her health. Now she has sinus issues, now she has brain fog, now she has short-term memory loss, now she can't remember which way to drop her children off at school. It's not a stretch. Now you can hire someone all day long to come in, and Dr. Scioto, I took Dr. Scioto's deposition the other day. Dr. Scioto is a hack who's hired by defense experts to say that mold doesn't cause cognitive harm. So I'm like, all right. I show him the NIH report that says, you know, it's a two-pager, it's an NIH two-pager, and it's just a fact sheet by the NIH, and it says, you know, symptoms of mold exposure, and one is cognitive decline. And he says, well, I don't agree with that. I don't believe that. I mean, you don't agree with NIH? Do you have any research to the contrary?
Yeah.
Well, you can have research say anything you want. Well, okay. So do you have any research that says that mold doesn't cause cognitive harm, contrary to the NIH? Well, you can have research say anything you want. There's research on both sides. Well, okay, what's the research on your side? Can't cite one, right? And that guy, you know, he says he's a doctor. When was the last time you treated anybody? Well, last week. What did you treat them for? Did they pay you for your services? Well, no. Okay. So you're not actually a treating provider. And you're just paid by the bad guys to say that mold doesn't hurt you. And that's, so I just have this deep faith in the people, and the people see through the Dr. Sciotos of the world, right? The people see through that, and they know this person was fine, moved into this place, that's what their vent looked like, and now they're sick. This is not hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you brought up the whole fact that doctors often don't know about mold, and people see that and they trust that their doctor would have told them if it's something that could have harmed them. And also, we're the face of the medical system, right? Doctors are, but it's so much bigger than that, because if I could have just said, oh, I'm going to go ahead and add mold into my regular practice, I would have done it. But I tried to do that and it was blocked by who? Insurance and administration. So it's way bigger than that. And that's what we're all trying to do, is change policy, right, in medicine as well as law, and change what is mainstream. And so glad, like you say, that science has caught up and that we have these reports out, we have the evidence, right? And it's just, undeniable. So I want to ask you, because we've been kind of touching on this a bit, if someone is listening to this, and many probably are thinking, I may have a legal case related to mold, so what should they do?
Call our office. So we take calls from all around the country. We always help people. We send them the resources that I wish that I had known. You're on it, Dr. Stafford. We want people to have the information. Not everybody has a case. Some people will say, well, I've been in this place for 10 years and it's had mold the whole time. And I'm just like, I'm really sorry, your statute of limitations expired 8 years ago. So it's hard for people to get out of a case, of a house. But let me tell you about the 3 things that make a viable case. Third party testing. It has to be your own paid third party assessment. Don't rely on your landlord to test or your builder to test, because your landlord or your builder will hire somebody to come in the middle of the room and say it's fine. So don't do that. You have to have a third party assessment. So third party assessment. Number 2, have you been to a doctor, or are you willing to go to a doctor who is a mold literate doctor like you, Dr. Stafford? If you're not willing to go or not able to go, you're probably not gonna have a case. And then third, have you gotten out, or will you get out? Because I cannot say that your house is uninhabitable if you are still there. Let me say that again. I cannot say your house is uninhabitable if you are still there. And I understand some of you might not be able to get out. You don't have the money to get out, whatever. I get it. That's okay. I understand. And you just don't have a case. Right? The one exception to that is there are sometimes entire buildings or military installations where they really don't have options, and we bring a whole base together. And in that case, sometimes I represent people who are still in the places. My advice is always get out, because I've had clients die in the houses I told them to leave, and I just don't want to be part of that. I really don't. And look, you think you can't afford to leave, and what I'm telling you is you can't afford to stay. If the house is going to kill you, you can't afford to stay.
Wow.
But if you have those 3 things, if you have, if you're willing to go to a doctor, you've gone to a doctor already, you have a third party mold assessment, and you are out or willing to get out of your house, then you probably have a viable claim, and we can help you find a lawyer. We are trying to build up an army of lawyers from around the country. And we now have people in every state. That does not mean, by the way, it does not, anyone who calls our office, you get our resources, okay? It does not mean that you have a case or that we can get you a lawyer in your state, but we will try. And if you have a viable case, we will try to connect you to a lawyer, and that's the best that we can do. I see that Airbnbs and hotels and schools, those are all bad. We agree. We usually can't bring cases about Airbnbs. It's just too short term. And also, you usually can't get third-party testing while you're there. It just doesn't make sense. Similarly with hotels, I've had circumstances where people worked at a hotel and that might be a viable claim. But if people are just coming in for a day, I'm not going to bring an injury claim for a day. These cases are expensive to try, and they're worth doing. But they're worth doing if it's really worth it for you and for us, because it can take a long time, and if it's not a viable case, we don't want to waste your time either.
Absolutely.
The name of our firm is called Just Well Law, and we do all environmental cases. So we do clean air, we do clean water. We just took on the East Palestine, Ohio train derailment. We just filed a case last week for 750 people there. And really, I'm invited by communities of sick families who call me and say, we need help. And I can come in and help unite them and bring claims against the institutions that hurt them.
And universities too, right? Who have the multiple cases going on right now currently with universities.
We have OSU, we have A&M. We're building a case for A&M, also a bigger case. So if you have a kid at A&M who's sick, let us know, especially the Corps of Cadets. And then similarly, we have Sewanee as well. And we're getting calls from more universities. And the principles are always the same, right? Tenants have the right to expect safe air. A parent has the right to expect that if they pay rent for a dorm, that the university will supply safe air.
Basic.
These are just universal principles. And what we find, especially at schools, is these kids come in and they can't learn and they don't understand why. But we know, you and I, all the three of us know, that mold really inhibits your ability to learn new things. So imagine you did great in high school, you got great grades, and now you get to go to college. And college freshman year is hard anyway. You have that imposter syndrome of, am I as smart as I thought I was? Or there are all these smart people around me. But now imagine if that's hindered by your environment, so you can't learn.
Definitely.
And it doesn't affect everybody the same way.
So important.
But if the UF dorms are full of mold, call us. We'll investigate and see if we can bring a claim.
Yeah,
I have lots of clients in college.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I hear it all the time. And unfortunately, it seems like a lot of the time the victims are the people who, college students don't tend to have a lot of money, or renters sometimes don't have a lot of money. Some of them do. But is there hope for, I know you represent tenants and you've had some pretty big settlements. How can maybe the lower income people hope to get justice? And is there like some kind of contingency fee, because you said they're expensive cases?
So I have a policy. I do not charge by the hour, because in my own case, I had to pay by the hour, and it, almost bankrupted my whole family. So I don't charge by the hour. I only do contingency. And what contingency means is we don't get paid unless our clients get paid. Our clients have just lost everything, right? What I say is, no matter how much money you have, you lose it all trying to get well.
Yeah.
Trying to get your house, trying to move out, trying to fix your house, trying to sell your thing, or sell your house, maybe trying to sell it at a loss, losing your belongings, however many belongings you had. It's you some of you can't work, so it has this huge financial cost, and the last thing they need to do in the midst of that is pay a lawyer. So we expend all the money on the front end and hire the experts and all the things ourselves. And then when you recover, that's when we recover too. Now, low income is really tough, right? Because low income communities are often less able to get medical care. And then they're also, less able to move out, and they're also less able to get the testing that I just mentioned. So I think military families actually sometimes fall in that category. And in Florida, we have worked with a doctor named Dr. Gruning, who has a free clinic for people who are affected. So military families have been going to him for free care, which is amazing. Really incredible. So I hope that there will be more clinics like that spring up around the country. I think that he wants to expand his free clinics. I love that. As soon as some of my big cases pay out, I'd love to contribute to that effort so that people can get the medical care they need. There are also potential loans you can take out against a case so that you can, move out. My firm is called Just Well because I just want people to be well. And I know that takes money to get to safety. And anything that I can do to help my clients get to safety, I want to help. So those are the conversations that we have. But again, this notion of we can't afford to leave, I have a client who couldn't afford to leave. And so she was told by her doctor to leave her windows open. So she left her windows open. And her 3-year-old fell out her window. Her 3-year-old amazingly was fine. It was a second story. It's a really unbelievable story that the 3-year-old was fine. But my point is, if you can't work, you have nothing. If you don't have your health, you have nothing. So you really can't afford to stay in a house that is poisoning you or killing you. And often it is actually killing you. By the time I moved out, I had POTS. I was taken to the emergency room a couple times. My heart was beating so fast it wouldn't calm down. I had anemia. I had internal bleeding. I had a huge tumor that had to be removed. I was so sick. And if I could look back and have one day less in that house, I would do it. I just didn't know.
Amazing. I mean, yeah, it's so, and we all, are offering sort of, like you have mentioned, Jonathan, free, content. Like I have a DIY sort of protocol on my page, and in my books and stuff, which is, free or low cost things that people can at least start with. And that's what I always say too, thanks for that, conquering mold. We all want to conquer mold. It's
Wow.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, this is, if you guys are watching and haven't seen it, our book, which Jonathan took the mold photos in that book, by the way. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Is a comprehensive resource on, mold, all things mold as well. So definitely, putting out all these resources for you guys. And we just, really admire what you're doing. And I feel like, and I heard you say, and I hear you say this a lot, it begins with empathy, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's what we're all huge on that. And it's just this basic human, thing that is not accounted for a lot of times when it comes to mold.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say that what I lost in brain power, I gained in empathy. And I now have this superpower, and I can come into a community and I know that they're sick because I can see myself in them. And I think one thing that happens, we said earlier that mold people are crazy, and that is, and by the way, this is true of all toxic exposure, because the defense in these cases, in every case that I've had so far, is there is not enough X to make people sick. And then if you follow the logic, anyone who then thinks that they're sick because of X is psychosomatic. So the Navy, in our Hawaii case, claimed that thousands of people were psychosomatic, right? The ones who were vomiting, and they went so far as to say that the rashes and welts that people had, and the vomiting and the diarrhea and things, that those were stress responses. They hired an expert to say that. You can hire an expert to say anything. Hire Dr. Shoto, y'all. I mean, Dr. Shoto will say anything, right? defendants can hire whoever they can hire someone to say anything, and they take that defense if there's not enough X. And so these victims have been told that they were crazy. And to have someone like the three of us who just exist in the world, our very existence encourages people because they know that they're not alone. And they can send this podcast, right? They can send our live to their mom or their sister who doesn't really understand, and they can help them understand. And I think that is one of the things that we need to do and that I'm working on lately is being more winsome about it, because I can get angry and can lambast the bad guys. And I'm working on being persuasive, because when we just speak truth and we show the truth, my clients in Hawaii, thousands of people who drank water contaminated by the US Navy, they kept saying that they are the data. You know, how do we know that it made people sick? Well, because people got sick, right? How do we know that there was enough fuel in the water to make people sick? Well, because thousands of people got sick. It's just a historic event. And the same thing is true in East Palestine, Ohio. How do we know that there was enough vinyl chloride and dioxide and all these other things that made people sick? Well, because people got sick. And it's really not hard to prove. It's just a function of understanding and believing and presenting it appropriately. You don't have to prove something beyond the shadow of a doubt. The question is it more likely than not that vinyl chloride or mold or jet fuel was a substantial factor in their health decline? And a jury is going to look at it and think, of course it was. Of course it was. This person was fine until they were exposed, and now they're not, right? Or maybe they weren't fine. Maybe they had asthma. Well, now they're using their inhaler 4 times as much. Maybe they had lung disease, and you know what? Now they're dead, right? That's true. Like maybe they had a cardiac issue, but then they died at 31 because you don't want to take a vulnerable person and expose them to a bunch of toxins. So I think that my family and my friends have come around to understand how dangerous this is. But it didn't start out that way because they didn't know. And now they know. Now they've seen us go through this, and now they know. And if it happens to them, they'll know. And so many of our friends now come back to us and say, hey, I knew to get tested because of you. And I'm so thankful for that we are sharing spreading awareness to our friends, but beyond our friends, to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so much not crazy, but, so many things you've said that are impactful. But I think it's interesting how mold is one of the most important ones almost, because the way I see it, and I've yet to be proven wrong, is that 100% of buildings do have mold. Every building I've been in the past probably 5 years has had mold, and people are saying 50%, 75%. Really, it's more like 100%. If we're talking about behind the walls, in the AC, if anyone has a building that's not moldy, I challenge you to bring me out there. But, indoor environmental law is affecting everybody, and indoor environmental science. And it's such a common thing. I'm wondering, you talked about dirty air, but air testing, I think, as we know, is not always enough. Air testing can miss the issues. So when you talk about third-party assessment, what is generally the best way to prove mold in the property?
Well, I can tell you what's not the best way. And I love deposing the bad guys. I shouldn't call them bad guys. I love deposing the opposing expert, mold assessors. Because I ask them, where is mold typically found? And they'll tell you it's found in the walls. Well, sir, if you're looking for mold in the walls, are you more likely to find it in the middle of the room or close to the wall? The mold assessor who came to my house, who saved my family's life, is a guy named Tim Taylor of Toolman Mold. And Tim Taylor told me that very first day that he often finds it behind the wall of the kid most affected. And so he took a flashlight to Maddie's wall. Why? Because that's where they're putting their head. Their head is right by the wall. So I like tests that I like wall tests, right? I like samples, wall samples, but I also really like HVAC samples, because I think a jury really understands this is the air that's coming in. This is the air they're breathing, and then I like pictures, because we can fight all day long about what's invisible, but would you put your daughter in a house with this HVAC or this vent? Is this how you treat your family? But often I find, this is not going to surprise you, but the defendants don't take air samples or wall samples or do anything, because they don't believe in testing. And in fact, in most of my cases, they have policies. Greystar has a policy that says that they do not use the word mold. Well, if you don't use the word mold, then of course you would never need to hire a certified mold assessor or a certified mold remediator. So now imagine you have millions of units around the country. And I know there are 23 million rental units around the country that are purchased by huge companies like Greystar, managed by companies like Greystar, who have policies that are like, we're not even going to talk about it. Well, if you're not going to talk about it and then you have water damage, of course you're not going to remediate it properly, and then it's going to proliferate. That's very scary. So that's why there's mold proliferating in all of these units around the country. That's why you see it in every house, because the water damage is being unaddressed, because the bad guys don't even use the word. They don't even use the word. And in Texas, there's a policy that says, there's a law that says that if you have a property of more than 9 units, you must use a certified mold remediator if you're going to address it. You can't use maintenance. But I think that they're literally trying to get out of the rule by not using the word. Because of course, if they don't use the word, then they wouldn't need to hire the certified professional to deal with it. If it's just dust, they think that they can hire whoever they want. And that's why it's so important for our clients to get the third-party mold assessments, because they're told it's dust. And this is gaslighting at the highest levels. I mean, I have a client in Florida, Balfour Beatty, and I use their names, by the way. I will call them out. I will use their names. Balfour Beatty tells her, walks into her house, and there's water damage on the ceiling, which, by the way, is true of every single house on that base, because of the way the houses have been constructed and neglected. And they tell her, you must be Italian. She's like, because you must be making a lot of pasta. I mean, when that's said to you, you get a little disoriented, right? Because these are people that you have trusted your family with, your life with, and they're trying to tell you that it's your fault that there is asbestos, mold, and lead in that ceiling that might be falling down at any moment, because ceilings there have been falling down for a decade. Oh my gosh. It's just, the absurdity of it knows no bounds, but it makes you feel a little bit crazy, because that's how they're treating you.
That is pasta lighting at its finest right there. That is ridiculous. Horrible.
Okay.
And I think I see a lot of issues with, speaking of mold testing, and obviously I'm more of a fan of mold assessment, which is more than just taking a test. It's a moisture assessment. Yeah. It's analyzing every level. Sometimes there's moisture, but there's not even mold yet. Right. But the moisture is a big problem, because moisture leads to mold. But I've seen, for example, the CDC and the EPA, 2 different agencies, spitting out different information about mold testing, and not recommending it or bring in a probe but don't get it tested. Is there any hope for government sort of congruency on these sort of things, or do people really have to look elsewhere?
I was thankful for the NIH two-pager that just came out. Wow, for the first time I saw a government agency recognizing the cognitive decline. That's a big deal. So I was thankful for that. There's new leadership in Washington. I hope that maybe they change their views on some of these things. I absolutely think that big insurance, big companies have gotten to those agencies and have influenced not only the agencies, but the science in America. And a lot of the science that came out about cognitive decline and children in particular is coming out from Poland and Europe. Very good articles that you can't dispute. They're peer reviewed, they're in American journals, but they're happening in Europe because industry doesn't want it to happen here. You see this, by the way, with food dyes right now. So I've been starting to talk about big food also. Big food is putting chemicals in our kids' food. But in Europe, they get carrot juice, right? And here they get red 40. It's a huge problem. And big industry has been poisoning our kids in America in all these different ways. And there is now a movement of families in America who are rising up. And I don't care if they are purple, blue, or red. It doesn't matter. It is a national movement. It's bipartisan, and it's families standing up and saying, you cannot poison our kids anymore. And we will bring the claims. And we will, you know what, you can take our deposition. And you can subject us to whatever testing you want to subject us to, because we are doing this not just for our own families, but for all the families to come, because it is not greedy to bring a claim, it is brave. And we're going to hold you to account. And they're doing that through litigation, and they're doing it through the March to Kellogg's, right? With just hundreds of thousands of signatures. They're rising up, whether it's policy or litigation. We all have to, academia, we all have to work together to reverse these trends in our country. And it's happening right now, and it's really beautiful to see.
I think it's so important too that you've spoken about who are we helping here. We're actually helping the defendants in a lot of ways, whether it's the government or these builders. We're exposing their weaknesses. Like, they don't want to get sued by 23 million different families, so maybe they should learn this stuff.
That is exactly, yes. I love to say, who loses if we win? Does the Navy lose if we win? Does our country lose if we win, right? Does OSU lose if we win? No, because we have made it safer. And even just by filing the case, I mean, when we do everything as a firm, we do it with a press release. So in East Palestine, we filed the case. We did a lot of media around it. Why? Because by filing it, these families are taking a stand, and they're calling out the bad actors, and they're saying not on our watch. And when we make that as public as we possibly can, that is part of the accountability and the deterrence that's being brought, right? You better believe that the president of OSU is wondering how this happened. How did we put all these freshmen in the storm with these pictures of the wallpaper coming off, and on the back of the wallpaper is just purple and blue fuzz, right? How did that happen? People are having those conversations at OSU. The railroad in East Palestine, they're having conversations this week. I guess the $600 million payoff that we made wasn't enough. Whoops. Because there are 750 people who say it's not okay, because they had a class action where they just paid $600 million, which is like nothing when you put it in context of the people there. But they're having these conversations. So we want them to be having the conversations. We want Kellogg's to be thinking about Red 40. Is it safe? And if not, what are we going to do about it? And I believe that even in bringing the cases that we are making a difference. And in, I remember deposing this military leader, military housing leader, and I said, now she filed a complaint with your office, right? And he said, yes. And I said, okay. And she laid out all the problems with this house. Yes. And then she went to Congress and she laid it all out, right? Yes. And you were aware of the complaints that she brought to Congress. Yes. In fact, you labeled her a high profile tenant, right? Yes. And then she filed a case in federal court, right? Yes. And it was a complaint. You've read the complaint. Yes. Sir, you're in charge of the housing division. Yes. And that includes maintenance. Yes. Before this deposition today, sir, had you ever looked at the maintenance history for this house? Had you ever ordered an inspection to make sure that the house is safe? Because she was crying out about the safety of this house because she didn't want other families to get in that house. Were you worried about their safety, sir? You know what I said? You know who cared about the safety of that house and the people who were in there next? Me. I ordered the inspection. And do you know what I found, sir? Mold growing on the next kid's bed. Every item that she identified as wrong is still wrong in that house. And I said, would you put your daughter in that house? I mean, that's a powerful, that guy's having a bad day, right? Because if he actually cares, and I actually do think that that guy cared. I mean, he said he would not put his daughter in that house and that he, wished that he had looked at it earlier and that he, but I said, well, what are you going to do with this mold test? Because the test that I had showed extreme levels of Stachybotrys. Are you going to give these test results to the new tenant so that they know what they were exposed to? These are tough questions for somebody to ask. So even the very discovery and deposition itself is I think makes a difference.
It's crazy. And I think military housing is probably the number one thing that I see. And I really think this is a matter of national security. We've seen people in the comments here, which we will get to, saying that every soldier on the base was not ready for duty because of mold.
Right.
And I think, I'm thinking there's probably mold in the White House and the Congress building, and I've seen it in courthouses. And how are we expected to make healthy changes if we're doing it in moldy buildings? It's just, even when our soldiers are overseas, their family who's back home taking care of the kids who they're fighting for are getting sick. So what are our guys and gals going to fight for if your family at home is getting sick? It's horrible.
Well, we can't be mission ready if our people are sick. And what I said in Hawaii is we can't be mission ready if we're poisoning our own people. That was, those are our best and our brightest. So that's our future. That's our security as a country. And we have to take care of them. And you know what we can't do? We can't look at sick people and tell them that they're not sick. Let's at least start there, right? If you're the EPA and the CDC and you come into East Palestine, don't tell the doctors not to treat people. And that's what we're going to be. That's that case. That's what our federal claims say. And when I take those depositions, I'm going to be asking those questions. Did you go in there? Did you tell those doctors not to treat people? Did you tell them not to do testing? But here are your OSHA guidelines for what happens when someone's exposed to vinyl chloride. It starts with testing. Of course it does, right? Dr. Stafford, if you have someone who's exposed And you probably did a stint in the emergency room, right?
Yep.
What do? You test.
To test, yep.
What do you test for?
Whatever, whole wide range of things, including anything that they were exposed to.
And including, you do CBC count, right?
Absolutely.
And you test thyroid, and you just do a standard liver enzyme, like you do a standard battery of tests, yep. Right? You don't tell the local emergency rooms not to see anybody. That's what they did.
That's crazy.
And I think we can all agree, like I tell my clients all the time, take fast action. You need to leave, probably. You need to see a doctor and get tested. You need to be within the statute of limitations. Don't wait another day. And sometimes people get in that mold hold where you can't really do things, but take as fast action as you can. And you mentioned leaving windows open. That's, someone can fall out, but it's also, you can be letting in more humidity and making things worse. So these DIY sort of fixes are not enough. You need to call in the big dogs, the doctor, the lawyer, the third-party assessor, and really take fast action. Like you said, one day makes a difference for your health.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. And, you were kind of asking about, there's a whole assessment that needs to get done. And it's not just testing. It's really easy actually to get anybody to agree to what you do when you believe there's mold someplace. Number one, you find the source, because otherwise it's going to keep coming back. And almost always the defendants have not even tried to find the source. They've just replaced the vent, right? They haven't addressed the source of the problem. That's almost always step number one. So the IICRC has great standards and protocols, and there are certainly rules that should be followed. And part of my job is just bringing it back to the basics, like find the source, dude. That's just, I can get everybody to acknowledge that the first step is to find the source. And of course, landlords have the obligation to prevent mold, to maintain properties in a way that prevents mold. And juries agree with that. And during voir dire, which is jury selection, I'm able to chat with the jury and say, what do y'all think? Do you think that a landlord should provide a house with safe air? And if so, how do they do that? And then they'll tell you, well, they should do regular inspections. They should check the HVACs regularly. They should look for water damage on a regular basis. This is not, it's not rocket science. And that's why I believe so much in the American people and in the jury system, because the lawyers and the doctors, even the Dr. Chiodos of the world, overcomplicate it. And really, it's just human decency and what is right and what is true.
So true. Yeah. Speaking of our discussion, we're going to have to wrap up pretty soon here because Instagram will cut us off at an hour. But Jonathan, is there anything else you wanted to bring up in the last minute or so?
Yeah, actually, a lot, but we only have an hour. Hopefully we can continue this conversation. But, I think the real tricky thing is the clean air concept or dirty air, because what I've seen in my experience as a third-party mold assessor is that the air is not always affected yet, but sometimes it's just the surfaces, whether there's surface mold or even let's say there's no mold at all yet. But if you have moist surfaces or humid air, moist air, you can still be affected even if, quote unquote, the air could be clean. But if your bed is covered in mold, it's literally touching your body. So I think that's a hard, all this is very hard to prove, but it's clean air and surfaces.
Don't say that, Jonathan. Don't say it's hard to prove. It's not hard to prove.
Not hard to prove if you have the right professionals, for sure. Or maybe not hard to prove at all, but definitely a tricky thing. And until you have the knowledge. But I do stand corrected. Definitely not hard. You know, I don't have a hard time coming into a home and saying, oh, there's no mold here. Actually, you have mold in 5 different places caused by 5 different issues. And I send crystal clear pictures and videos, and people are like, that's my house. That's my attic. I didn't even know I had an attic. And there's bats and rats, and the bats and rats are covered in mold. Like, I mean, that's real. There's mold spiders. I mean, there's a whole, but like you said, I mean, you know, these cases are almost common sense when you have the right professional. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for, I mean, like you said, we just kind of scratched the surface with some of these big issues that we're all bringing attention to on our pages. And how can people get in touch with you?
Follow us at Just Well Law on Instagram. We're right here. And then cheer us on and cheer on the brave plaintiffs who are taking a stand for all of us. Cheer them on. And that's what's happening, by the way. That's what's so beautiful about social media that I hadn't appreciated. You know, thank you to both of you for cheering us on, because man, it's hard. I mean, I'm saying it's easy, Jonathan. These are hard cases, and the judges can be really tough, and opposing counsel can be jerks. And so when people are cheering us on, it just gives us the motivation and the courage to keep going, and to do more, and to take the next case, and to, you know, do it again.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely cheer you on, and we applaud you and are so thankful for you. You know, I'm so thankful that you're here, you're doing what you do, and that we can be a part of it. So thanks everyone for joining, and we will talk again soon.
To be continued, everybody.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much. Keep fighting, please. We appreciate it.
All right. Bye, guys.